Okay, I see the dot. So let's get started. Thanks, Pete. And thanks for all of you for tuning in today. Mesquite is kind of the main focus of what we're going to talk about today, but we'll also talk about some other brush species. Mesquite does have some benefits, and in this particular picture right here, I think you can see that there's a bull right here who's taking advantage of that mesquite for shade in South Texas. So it's not all bad, although it's one of the species that we do have problems with and try to manage. One of the things that we do know about mesquite is it does have some wildlife value, and this table here shows some of those values. For example, it has value for white-tailed deer for forage. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a great forage. It just means that it has some value. And then the mast or the seed is used by a number of different species. It's also served for protection for game birds, songbirds, and small mammals, and also nesting cover, roosting cover. So it does have some value. And I guess the one thing that we need to think about is that we can manage these plants, but we can't eradicate them. So if brush eradication is something that's in your brush management vocabulary, I'd suggest that you delete that word eradicate. I'll show you why here in a couple minutes. This is a publication, Mesquite Ecology and Management. It's the number is ERM 045. It's available in the agrilifebookstore.org. You can download this. It's a PDF form. You can download it for free. And we just revised it this month, so it's got some new information in it that we didn't include in the previous version. So you're welcome to go to the bookstore or contact your local county agent if you can't get to the bookstore. I guess the worst thing about the bookstore is you do have to create an account, which means you need another user name and password. But you can download this for free. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about relative to mesquite is in that publication, so it can reinforce what we're talking about today. There are several species of mesquite across the state. The one that we generally are talking about is the honey mesquite here. All regions of the state except the piney woods. And then we've got these other species that are around different locations. The western honey mesquite, that's one that out west and up in the panhandle is also referred to as Torreana. It's appears to be more difficult to control than just the honey mesquite. So there are some different species around, but the major one statewide is this honey mesquite. So I've got a quiz question for you here as we get started, and Pete's gonna show a survey here. So how long does mesquite seed generally last or is viable on the soil surface? So just pick a choice there, and when we get you have a chance to cast your ballot, we'll give you the right answer. Or the answer is based on research. Okay. So I think we got most of you. And there's no penalty for being wrong. So about 72% of you say it's 10 years or more, and then 50 years or more is 18, and then 1 year is about 9%. So let's go to the next slide where we'll show you what the so in a herbarium sample, if you put it in a room where you control humidity and temperature, the seed can be viable for 50 years. But out in nature, it's only got about a 12-month viability. And research that was done at Vernon as well as Uvalde showed that about 95 to 99% of seeds that were produced in an individual year would not germinate 12 months later. So another thing that we see is that seeds tend to disappear from the soil within about 3 to 5 weeks, even when livestock are not around. That study was done around San Angelo. The unfortunate thing is that in a good year, a large mature tree can produce about 50,000 seeds. So even 5% of that is a lot of seed. So what these seed need to germinate and establish is a maximum of about 2/10 of an inch of soil depth. They will germinate, or most of them are going to germinate within that first year after they're planted. Low germination on grass surfaces, which suggests that good grazing management could help slow down invasion by mesquite. They will germinate on organic debris, but they don't need soil cover for germination, but they do need soil cover for establishment. So they can germinate without soil cover, but then they can't really take root and get established without that soil. So there was an experiment done up in the rolling plains, and they actually planted mesquite seeds in these two different ranches under different mesquite densities. And you can see that the actual emergence was anywhere from 17 to 47% here. But after 2 years, the survival rate was anywhere from 0 to 17%. So relatively few of these seeds that were planted actually survive after 2 years. So that suggests that it takes a pretty good period of time for mesquite density to get established. So we have some windows where we can actually do some good in terms of management. As far as dispersal goes, one of the things that we know seeds are dispersed in is animals will eat the seed and then defecate, and we'll see the seeds. In fact, in this is a cow pie, and right here where we got that arrow, that's a mesquite seed, and there's actually several mesquite seeds in this cow pie. So in the next picture, this is a different cow pie, but we can see that we've got all these seeds that have actually germinated in here. So the question is, how many of those might survive? And there was actually an experiment done where they looked at that. Germination through animals, horses, about 82% of the seed that comes through a horse germinate. Steers about 69%, and ewes only about 25%. So there's a difference between or among wildlife or livestock species is germination. So they did this experiment where they looked at survival in cattle, deer, and coyote feces, and after 2 years, again, relatively low survival rate, anywhere from 6.5 in the coyote up to 13.5 in the deer and 12 in the cattle. So again, not all the seed that come through these animals are necessarily going to survive, because they're competing with other mesquite and other plants for that survival. Okay, so this you might think this is a really strange thing right here. This is a mesquite nursery that was established in 1941 at the experiment station in Spur, Texas. And what they did was they went in and they mechanically removed the mesquite in this 1 acre area. And everywhere you see a stake, that's where mesquite was removed. And over the course, they did this experiment over the course of about 25 years. And over the course of that time, in 41, when they started, they removed 213 trees. And then about every 4 to 7 years, they would go in and remove the seedlings or juvenile trees that were coming in. So in 45, 109, another 185 in 52, 75 in 57, and 107 in 1964. So over a total of 25 years, there were actually 689 plants removed, including 473 seedlings. So the first, maybe the first, in that first go round, after the trees were removed, you might have some viable seed in the soil, but after that period, you're probably looking at new seeds being brought in by other animals. Now, there was no livestock grazing in this area, but the wildlife, as we showed with coyotes and with deer and other animals that eat the seed, they can disperse the seed. So, but the real take-home message is that, like I said at the beginning, we can't really eradicate these brush species. We can manage them, but eradication is really not an option. Okay, so to get established, the mesquite needs a soil temperature of around 77 degrees, and it needs soil moisture for about 3 to 5 days after germination. And that first year is very critical. You can see from those 2-year survival rates that is true. And then top removal, if it's done below the cotyledon, then that tree will be destroyed. If it's above the cotyledon, then that tree will survive and then become actually typically a multi-stem plant. So a lot of things can happen to that plant. They can be stepped on, that young plant can be eaten, and so forth. So, but what happens during that period and then later can have an effect on the growth form that we see. So these trees mature after about 3 years, which means they're able to produce flowers and seeds. And these mature honey mesquite have 2 growth forms. There's a single stem growth form, which means that growth has been unaltered and was vigorous during that juvenile growth stage. And then the multi-stem shrub, that's where the juvenile top growth was removed or interrupted in some way. Or we can have the multi-stem form developing if the top growth is removed by shredding, dozing, different practices like that. And burning mature trees can also result in multi-stem plants. So this is what the growth forms look like. This is in the upper left-hand corner. There's a tree that's not been disturbed. It's a single stem plant, and that's the easiest kind of plant to control because we've got access to better access to the bud zone. When we get into the multi-stem plant form down here, then our options for control are narrower. And we'll talk about that as we go through here. Okay, one of the things ecologically that we know about mesquite is it's a legume, so it does fix nitrogen. But trees that are less than 3 inches in diameter and less than 14 feet tall have active nitrogen fixation, but they really don't contribute a lot to the soil. They don't really increase soil nitrogen very much, which suggests that these are trees that we might concentrate thinning to thin because they're really not making much of a contribution in terms of soil nitrogen and carbon. These mature trees like this one here, you'll see in the inner space the grass is sparse, but right underneath the canopy of the tree we have some dense grass, and what that is suggesting is that tree actually creates kind of a nice environment there for some of those grasses to grow. And these mature trees do have, there is higher nitrogen and carbon underneath these mature trees than in these open spaces that we see here. So, you know, a few larger trees might be beneficial in terms of shade for livestock. It might be also be beneficial just for other reasons, for wildlife habitat, for fixing nitrogen and so forth. So question is kind of, when does the mesquite canopy cover affect forage production? And it appears that occurs around 20% canopy. It begins around 11%, but then really gets serious in terms of affecting or competing with forage production when you get to 20% plant cover. So these two graphs just kind of suggest when that canopy cover might become a problem based on the tree canopy diameter. So for example, if we had canopy diameter of 5 feet, it would take about 450 trees per acre before that cover would reach that 20% threshold. If we had trees that were 15 feet in diameter, it would require about 50 of those to have that same canopy diameter, 20% canopy diameter. So just kind of an indicator of when it might become a problem. Eventually, I mean, if you've got 450 trees, obviously eventually they're going to become a problem. Whoops, went the wrong way, sorry. Okay, so in terms of management options, we've got a whole bunch of them. And so here in the upper left-hand corner, that's a root plow. That type of equipment was used a lot in South Texas years ago, when they used to root plow from fence row to fence row and then come in and reseed with buffalo grass. That practice has kind of fallen out of favor, especially with landowners who are interested in wildlife habitat, because typically what follows that root plowing in terms of brush are problem species like prickly pear, weesach, twisted acacia, at least in South Texas. The excavators have been used, seen some use of this up in the panhandle area, on the eastern panhandle area for redberry juniper. And also here they're extracting a mesquite, but this works where you've got a fairly low density of brush, so that you don't have a tremendous amount of soil disturbance. And so we've got different kinds of practices. Here's a individual plant grubber. This device here, the skid loader, has a shear on the front, but then it also sprays the cut surface of the mesquite. We've got aerial application with fixed wing, with helicopter. We can do ground broadcast applications. And then we've got individual plant stem sprays, leaf sprays, and cut stumps. So we've got a whole bunch of different practices or options for controlling this or managing the plant. So we'd like to target the management at the weakest link, and that tends to be the seedling or juvenile stages. And if we concentrate efforts on these stages, we can prevent seed production, and we also have smaller plants and hopefully less density, so that we can lower our cost. That doesn't mean we want to go in and make a large plant smaller by shredding it or removing the top, because that really doesn't help us a lot. Okay, so one of the things that's really important to understand about mesquite, and this is the same with weesach. Now, most brush species are sprouters. Mesquite has this central bud zone here. In this particular picture, we've got a 12-inch school ruler. So the bud zone, this is a soil surface right here, and then we've got these knots or dormant buds along that central bud zone that go down all the way down to the first lateral root. So mesquite tree sprouts from this bud zone. It doesn't sprout from the lateral roots. So the target, if we're going to, if our definition of controlling mesquite is to kill the plant, then we have to make this bud zone the target. And so there are basically two ways we can do that. One is, and this is, we're talking about trees that are mature where this bud zone is now below the ground and protected. So one way is to mechanically remove the bud zone with root plowing or grubbing. And another way is to get a herbicide to move uniformly into that bud zone. And that uniform movement is very, very important. If we don't get uniform movement, then the plant these buds can resprout from areas where the herbicide didn't reach. In fact, this picture right here, I'm sure most of you have seen this as you travel down the road somewhere. You'll see half a tree killed in a fence line. And the reason for this is incomplete coverage. And so here where the arrow is, we've got that part of the plant was killed, and over here where we weren't able to spray the whole plant because it was that tall, we've got that part of the plant is still living. And the reason for that is that a tree's vascular system is not like our circulatory system. We need to get uniform movement. So in this particular picture where we got kill, the herbicide moved down and killed buds on that side of the plant, but did not kill buds on the other side of the plant because it can't move laterally, and the herbicide doesn't circulate through the tree when it goes through the leaves and then down to the bud zone, like when we take an aspirin or we take a leave or some pain pill like that. So we do need to get uniform movement into that bud zone. So if we had been able to spray the whole tree here, we would have had a much better chance of getting complete kill. So getting uniform movement into that bud zone is very important. So again, we go back to these growth forms. We got the single stem, the multi-stem. Single stem, we've got more options. We've got leaf spray, we've got stem sprays, cut stumps much easier. We get into the multi-stem plants, and then we're kind of narrow. Our options are narrowed. It's really difficult to get good kill. To get good kill with stem sprays with multi-stem plants like this one in the lower right-hand corner. And this was actually an aerial project where they looked at the number of stems per plant and kill. So when they had 1 to 2 stems, the rate of kill was 75%. When they jumped up to 3 to 5, it came down to 59, and then 6 or more stems, 40%. So even from an aerial application standpoint, they were able to get good kill on plants that had fewer stems. So again, it's that concept of getting better uniform movement into that bud zone. And in plant height, it also affects mesquite and definitely weesach from ground broadcast and aerial applications. The effect here is not as dramatic as with the stem numbers, but you see when we get over here to more than 6.5 foot tall, our efficacy is reduced. Our plant kill is reduced. So these are just things that kind of we need to understand to kind of be able to evaluate how successful we are with a practice. Okay, so in terms of management, we have some density considerations. If we have more than 400 trees per acre, then that's a situation that might be broadcast aerial or ground herbicide broadcast or mechanical, but it would be a broadcast application. And then for mechanical, remember we have to remove the bud zone, and the options we have here are either broadcast root plowing or chaining. For chaining, we need to have good enough soil moisture so that the chain can pull the plant out of the soil. And then the other option we've got, if the density is low, is if we've got densities that are less than 400 plants per acre, we can look at using individual plant grubbing. Okay, in terms of herbicides, again, we want uniform herbicide movement into that bud zone. We've got the option of IPT stem sprays, tree shearing and spraying, and these can be done any time of the year. Then the leaf sprays, these are done typically about somewhere between 45 and 90 days after bud break, and that's not set in stone. You know, you can watch bud break, but then there's some other things that you really need to watch, and we'll look at those in a minute here. So in terms of cost, the reason that we look at about 400 plants per acre being kind of a threshold from going to individual plant to broadcast is, for broadcast, it doesn't matter how many plants you've got out there, it still costs you the same per acre. But here with the leaf spray and the stem spray, you can see that cost doesn't exceed that broadcast rate until you get up here around that 400 plant per acre level. So that's why we kind of use that as a 300 to 400 plant range for a threshold to switch from individual plant to leaf spray. Now, of course, individual plant has to, these have to be plants that are small enough that we can actually treat from the ground. Okay, so the leaf sprays, they're most effective when we have a heavy foliage cover present, and then in that 45 to 90 day range after bud break, after those first leaves emerge. And it works best for mesquite, when we've got soil temperatures that are above 75 degrees, 12 inches deep. Leaves are uniform dark green, no significant hail or insect or drought damage. No new leaves initiated by recent rains. The bean pods fully elongated. They don't have to be full, but they do need to be elongated. And the reason for this in the flowers is that during those stages, instead of transferring carbohydrates to the bud zone and roots, now the carbohydrates are being transferred to those elongating beans and those developing flowers. So you get less movement of carbohydrate down to the bud zone, and if you spray during those times, you're going to get less herbicide moved along with that food. Okay, so what does dark green color look like? On the left here, we've got a plant that still has light green foliage. It's really too early to spray. On the on the right here, we've got a plant that's turned that dark green foliage. So that's what we're looking at. When we've got this kind of dark green foliage, we know that the foliage is mature, and now it's producing more food than it needs. It's not sending food to beans if the beans aren't there, or if they're elongated. Okay, so this is just this is from 2016. This is 3 places here where we looked at bud break. March 14th down around here, around Uvalde where I am. Out in the Trans-Pecos, it was around March 9th, and up here, Central Texas, it was March 14th. So theoretically, about 45 days after that bud break, you should be able to start spraying. But that's theoretical. One of the things that we do when we're looking at broadcast applications, aerial or ground, we'll take soil temperature. And so we've got a thermometer here that has a 12-inch probe. We've got a tool here to make a pilot hole so that you don't bend the probe on the thermometer, and this hammer to drive that tool for the pilot hole in the ground. So you can see here we're measuring soil temperature. In this case, it was about 80 degrees, which is above the threshold that we need. So this is this year, and this is from March, and you can see that soil temperature was 73 degrees, 71, 68, all the way down to 54 up here in kind of the south end of the rolling plains. So that's the way mesquite development moves from south to north, which is really no surprise to any of us. But we do need to watch soil temperature. We do need to watch that leaf color as indicators, especially leaf color as indicators of when that spray season can start. So this is 2016 during just about this time, and here, down around here where I am, the soil temperature was 72 degrees. And in fact, this week I measured soil temperature and it was 72 degrees. Now, the point of this is bud break where I am was March 10th. So theoretically, 45 days from March 10th, we should be able to start spraying. So we should already be there based on that 45-day window. But we're not there yet. So I think we're probably still 2 weeks off. And over the last several years, that's what we've been seeing. We have bud break in the middle of March, but then it's the middle of May before we actually get that soil temperature up where it's above the threshold. So you can't just go by that 45-day number. Okay, so I'm going to take a breath here for a second and see if there's any questions. Okay. Let me see if there are any.
The one question I saw was when you were talking about survival, going through a deer, cow, sheep. Jerry asked, what about goats?
I don't know about goats, but I would think they would be similar to sheep, but I don't know. The point is that you're going to get some germination. You're you know, they do help germination because that seed spends time in the rumen, allows it to imbibe moisture, and then it's deposited in a nutrient-rich environment. And maybe with sheep, well, it may be because of the nature of the manure. You know, if you look at horses and cattle, you've got more manure mass there, you know, rather than a pelleted. So I would kind of guess that the goat would be like the sheep.
Let me go ahead and answer the Warren's question. He's asking about getting the CU credit, but he doesn't have his applicator's license number yet. And the answer is no. Whenever we submit the report goes back to your license number. If you don't have a license number, we cannot submit the report.
Right. You need to have your license before you can get CEU credits. And Michael Williams asked, is there a link to the PDFs? I don't have a link on here, but well, agrilifebookstore.org. You can type that in Google or whatever search engine you use, and go to that site. And then, as I said, you need to establish an account and username, password, and then you can download everything that's free. And a lot of the publications are free. Okay. Okay, Patrick asked about, please say what the recommended soil temperature should be. The minimum soil temperature is 75 degrees, 12 inches deep. That's the threshold. And if it's hotter than that, that's even better. You know, 80, 85, as long as you're still within the, you know, we get to a point in the year where it's too late to spray, you know, where the leaves aren't really active and absorbing the herbicide. Okay, David asked recommended herbicides for spraying treatment if you don't have a license. All right, if you're gonna do stem sprays, you can use Triclopyr ester, which doesn't require a license. That's a generic. That's the active ingredient. But that comes in Remedy Ultra. It also comes in some different generic herbicides. If you're going to do leaf sprays, if we're looking at mesquite, Sendero doesn't require a license, and that would be the leaf spray option. Okay, quality probe. I would say you could go on to a place like Ben Meadows online or forestry suppliers and look for a soil probe, soil temperature thermometer, or even a compost thermometer. Okay. I think we'll move on, and then I'll catch other questions as we get some more. Okay, so herbicide options, ground broadcast. We've got obviously fixed wing here. We've got helicopters. Advantage of a helicopter is you don't have to have a landing strip nearby. They come with a truck that they can land on. And then we've got ground broadcast equipment like this one in the bottom center. The thing that for ground broadcast, you want to make sure that you're 18 to 24 inches above the canopy so that you get good coverage on the foliage. Okay, so another important aspect of controlling mesquite is droplet size. This is an experiment that we conducted at the McGregor research station, AgriLife station, and what we did is we looked at droplet size and spray volume. And you can see that here when droplet size was 400, 443, we had, even 4 years later, we had plant mortality above 70%, in the 75 and a little bit better percentage. When we got to 545 droplet size, we lost a little bit, but then when we got above, like around 600 and above, dramatic reduction in plant kill. So even though we had 10 gallons of spray volume per acre, droplet size was more important than that 10 gallons per acre. So this is something that we've seen with mesquite, and we've also seen the same thing with Weesatch. So in our suggestions, we suggest minimum of 4 gallons per acre aerial application and 10 to 20 gallons of spray volume per acre with ground broadcast. Ground broadcast, we try to use 30 to 40 pounds per square inch of spray pressure. So just to kind of let you know that droplet size is important. And you may think those are small droplet size, and they're really not. They're not anywhere near what you'd see with a mist blower for pecans. So even though they look small, they're not that small. When you get up here around that 800 range, you're looking at raindrop size. Okay, so in terms of leaf spray, the product that's really performing really well for us right now is Sendero, which it's a standalone product, been out for a few years now. It's a combination of clopyralid, which was the active ingredient in Reclaim, and aminopyralid. Lower volatility because there's no esters in the formulation. Non-restricted use, which means you don't have to have a license to buy it and use it. And there are no livestock grazing restrictions. And what we see with Sendero is here's Sendero by itself, Reclaim by itself, and then Reclaim Remedy together. And what we're seeing is more consistency with the Sendero. So if you look at the variation here around Remedy Reclaim, for example, versus the Sendero, that variation around that average, I mean, and statistically, we can't separate this average from this average because these error bars overlap. But you can see that that variation around that average is less. So that's what we mean by consistency. And that's what we're seeing with Sendero. Mechanically, this is a device that this gentleman invented. He calls it a Vendetta. It's a sharpshooter he cut off about 5 inches wide, replaced the handle with 1.25 inch steel pipe. We've got the excavator, root plows, and also individual grubbing. From a IPT chemical standpoint, we've got stem sprays as an option. We've got leaf sprays here with this ATV and this 2-person crew. Those two 20-foot hoses, they can cover a 40-foot swath. This is a skid loader with shears, and behind the shears they've got a spray so that they can do cut stump with this. And so this is effective if it's done correctly. If they cut too low and get soil up on the cut surface, it's not going to work. If they don't spray enough volume, it's not going to work. For stem sprays, this is equipment that we typically use. It's a backpack sprayer. It's got this one has an aftermarket harness here that we like because it's got the padded belt and the padded shoulder straps. For stem sprays, I would never fill this up because you can go an hour with a gallon of diesel and triclopyr ester and then take a break and refill. So another quiz question here. How many stems per plant are best for stem spray treatment methods? 1 to 3, 4 to 7, or it doesn't make any difference? Okay, we've got an educated group because the answer is 1 to 3 stems. When we got that one stem, we're going to get, this is a rough bark plant, but if it was a smooth bark one stem plant, we got much more likelihood of getting uniform movement into that bud zone. Here, with that multi-stem plant, we've got to treat every stem, drives your cost way up, and drives your plant kill way down. In this picture, we've got these backpack sprayers typically come with a fan type nozzle. In this case, the fan type nozzle is overspraying. So there's a solution for that. And the solution is we will replace that nozzle with a small orifice nozzle like this ConeJet X. It's an adjustable nozzle. It's a 5500 X1. And let's see. Behind that, we want a 100 mesh screen check valve that keeps the nozzle from clogging. It also, when you let up on the trigger, the nozzle stops dribbling, so you keep things cleaner. And this is what the spray pattern looks like when you use this right kind of nozzle. So you adjust that spray to a fine cone, and you spray from 12 inches high all the way to ground line, all the way around. We use Triclopyr ester, which comes either in Remedy Ultra or it comes in different generics like this Clear Pasture and some others. We're going to mix 15 to 25% Triclopyr. If we've got stem diameters that are 1.5 inches up to 4 inches that are still smooth bark, we'll use the 25. You want to lightly wet all the stems all the way around from 12 inches all the way ground line, and this works any time of year. We get a little bit of a dip in the fall, but it's generally still adequate. Okay, so we've got this new herbicide, Sendero, and the question is, can we mix Sendero with diesel for stem sprays and cut stumps? Yes or no? Okay, so it's almost almost an even split, but the no's are about 55%. So here's your answer. No. On the right here, this is Sendero and Diesel. On the left, we've got Remedy and Diesel. Same percentages, 25%. So the Sendero is precipitating out because it's not an ester formulation. It won't mix with oil. And so we shook it up and set the bottle down, and you can see that it starts to precipitate, settle out immediately. So not for stem sprays. It's a leaf spray primarily for mesquite. We can use it for individual plant leaf spray for weesatch, if weesatch is a problem. And if you don't have a license and your mesquite and weesatch are ready at the same time, Sendero would be a good choice. All right, so leaf sprays, we've got all these different ways we can apply it. These pump-up type sprayers, not very convenient. The backpack sprayers, now you have to fill that up and carry it around. So it's better to put that load in something like an ATV or a mule. This lower right-hand photo here, two 20-foot hoses. Driver has a hose that he or she can spray with. Does a really good, really efficient job. When we go to leaf spray, now we're going to go to an X8 nozzle, a bigger orifice nozzle, because now we want a bigger volume. We want to spray and get those leaves completely covered. The standard before Sendero was the use of Triclopyr ester, clopyralid, surfactant at 0.25%, dye at 0.25% for individual plant leaf sprays. The reason I've got the X on the reclaim is that Dow has stopped making reclaim because of the Sendero. So one of the other things that's really, really important is a surfactant. On the left here, we've got water without surfactant. On the right, we've got water that was sprayed with surfactant at 0.25%. And you can see we don't have the surfactant, we get these bubbles. On the right, we get more uniform coverage. That's what we want when we do a leaf spray. We want that leaf to be covered. Okay, so again, for individual plant treatments, we've got more consistency with the Sendero at a 1% concentration than at lower concentrations or with Remedy Reclaim. So 1% Sendero, you can still use the Triclopyr clopyralid mix if you want to. You're going to have to buy a generic clopyralid if you do that. So dye at 0.25%, I'm sorry, surfactant 0.25%, dye 0.25%, dark green leaves. And depending on where we are in the state, maybe up into September, down here where I am, that won't work typically. Okay, want carbohydrate flow going down, indicated by those dark green leaves. And then we get to cut stump. You want to cut close to the surface. You want to treat immediately after you cut the plant, because you've got a fresh cut there. You want to spray the whole cut surface and whatever bark is sticking up above the ground. Here in the lower right-hand corner, that's too much stem. So it's an accident waiting to happen, plus you're going to waste chemical. If you do it correctly, it's almost 100% effective. In this case on the left, they missed one stem. Over here on the right, they missed part of the cut surface. And so below that point where they missed, you're getting resprouting. So that's why you need uniform coverage of the cut surface, so you get uniform movement into that bud zone. Okay, so the last quiz question is fire an effective tool for mesquite control? Yes or no? Yes, no, or maybe? Okay, so in this case, I would have to really give the answer to the maybes. In general, I'd say no, but I'll show you why we say maybe. This is work that was done up in the Vernon area, and they looked at prescribed burning for mesquite seedlings or juveniles that were 10 to 17 months of age. On the left, we got a midgrass situation where you got low grass production here, and a summer burn gave a very good kill of these seedlings. Over here in the tall grass prairie, winter and summer burns, because we had high fuel loads here, both gave very good kill of the seedlings. So if the seedlings are less than 17 months of age, then fire could be an effective tool. But on mature mesquite, no. Because we kill the top, we don't get to the bud zone, and so it resprouts on us. Okay, so for mixed brush, because it's mixed, we're going to have mixed results. This whole group of plants here, broadcast application for black brush and a whole other host of species here, we get a medium kill, which means we're looking at 36 to 55% kill. Individually, some of these plants we might get much better kill. Like for example, on black brush, we might get very good kill, especially with Pictoram copyrolid. But in general, for that group, we're going to be looking at a moderate kill range. So when we have that mixed brush, we have to kind of have some mixtures that will deal with those species. This is just another example in our guide, in our 1466 guide. Different mixtures still get the same control rating. And this is out west. We can use tebuthyron, but we still get, for this mix of brush here, we still get a medium kill rate. So anytime we've got mixed brush, we're expecting kind of a medium kill. Okay, so our ERM 1466, that's our guide that has all of our chemical weed and brush control suggestions in it. And so we've added a new section, and that section includes a herbicide called aminocyclopyrachlor, and this is for fence lines and wildlife habitat zones only, no livestock grazing. And the reason is that there's no grazing label for this product yet. Bayer Chemical does have a petition in front of EPA to get a grazing label, but it doesn't have it yet. So the product that contains that chemical is method 240 SL. If you just buy a method 240 SL by itself, it's pretty pricey, but if we combine it either with Garlon 3A or a Triclopyr ester like Remedy Ultra, we can get the cost down where it's reasonable, where it's in the range of something like Sendero. And it does have a use on a lot of chemicals broadcast. At this point, mesquite and weesach, we have suggestions for that. And then individual plant treatments, quite a few species that we do have recommendations for. And I'll run through those kind of quickly. This is pretty fuzzy, but this is one of the pages in the publication, and it shows all the information, time to apply, remarks, and so forth associated with each of these practices. And a little closer look, here's a group that includes Agorito, it includes Texas mountain laurel, which are tough, and these are leaf sprays. These are plants that are difficult to control, and we're getting very high kill rates with leaf sprays on these plants. And this is the 0.5% of the method 240 SL and 0.5% of Triclopyr ester, or a little bit more of the Triclopyr amine. So it does give you the rates. And then let's see. Right here, this is weesach, this is stem spray, and what's kind of interesting is this is in water as a carrier for a stem spray. Okay, and also mesquite in water as a cut stump in water. And then here's mesquite as a stem spray, again in water. We had to go with a little bit higher rate for Texas persimmon than those other species above it. So these all have control ratings like very high, high to very high, that can give you an idea of how they work. So these are the species that we know this combination works on now. And it may work on other species, but we don't have data to support that at this point. This is a mixing guide. It tells you how much, if you have a 0.5% of method, how much per gallon, how many ounces per gallon, and then for the either amine or the ester formulations. Okay, so I'm going to stop and see if we have any questions. Okay, let's back up here. Okay, we talked about that. Again, I think I mentioned what we recommend if you don't have a license. It would be something, I mean, it depends on what you're doing, but for stem sprays, cut stump, it'd be something like Triclopyr ester. For leaf sprays on mesquite and weesatch, individual plant, it would be Sendero. Sendero also works on mesquite broadcast, but we don't have broadcast suggestions for weesatch. Okay. How should I treat 18 to 24 inch recent sprouts, mostly single stem, that probably don't have enough leaf to carry herbicide? If they don't have enough leaf to carry herbicide, you need to wait till they do. If they're regrowth from previous shredding or something, you may need to wait a couple of growing seasons. The webinar is recorded, yes. How long after foliage treatment with Sendero before the dead plant can be removed? That's a good question. Okay, Sendero has 2 herbicides in it that are active for quite a while, so you want to wait at least a year, maybe longer, because those herbicides can still be active. A good indicator of that is aminopyralid, that's one of the active ingredients in Sendero, is also in Graze On Next. And Graze On Next, there's a haying restriction. You can't sell hay off the place for 18 months. And that's because it's still in that hay. So it could still be active in the brush. So you do want to give it time to act. If you can walk up and push that plant over with your foot, then it's probably dead, but you do want to wait at least a year. If you have to have it out of the way, then maybe cut stump would be something you want to look at. Best source to find someone aerial spray, I would talk to your county agent or your local NRCS office and see who's around that can. Some of these aerial applicators come in from out of state. Okay. Cut stump spray methodology. Okay, you cut it close to the ground and level. You spray with 15% Triclopyr and diesel, and you spray immediately after you cut the stump. And that Triclopyr can be Remedy Ultra or generics of that product. A good chemical for spot treatment of mesquite. And a license. Okay. Spot. Oh, okay. You're saying Pathfinder is good. Okay. Pathfinder has triclopyr ester in a vegetable oil, and the biggest problem with it is the concentration of the triclopyr is about 13 to 15%. So it's good for small stem plants. It would work for cut stump, but it is expensive. So you can, if you buy just straight triclopyr, you can mix a lot more. But it's fine. Okay. John says backpack split yesterday with remedy diesel stem, which soaked jeans, took shower immediately. How dangerous! I had that happen to me about 20 years ago, and I'm still around. So I don't think you're in much danger. Okay, for honey locusts, off the top of it depends on what you want to do. Cut stump, stem spray. You can also do leaf spray with Grazon P plus D, and there's a couple other recommendations. Uh, okay, Alan says resprouts hit with stem or leaf spray. Uh, if they're resprouts, you probably want to hit. You probably want to wait for do a leaf spray. Okay, I think that was all the questions. Okay, Pete.
Yes, sir. I was trying to see if Alan typed something there. I was trying to read the question. Alan says also what to do with leaf spray plants for part of the plant that didn't die. Oh, that's one you just answered.
Oh well, I'd spray. I'd do the leaf spray on the part that didn't die. The next, I mean, if it's a year later, you could still spray what's live,
So
but leaf spray.
I'm gonna go ahead and thank you all for attending today. If you have any questions, y'all keep on asking questions, typing them out. I kicked out our survey. The survey didn't pop up in your screen. Please click on the link. Our next session is on June the 7th. It's to be announced. If you're not doing so and you're on Facebook, you can follow us on Facebook on facebook.com/txrange. And once you get there, if you look through it, there's some. I know that some folks asked some questions about cut stump or whatever. There's on that page. There's a link that Dr. Clayton did on cut stump video link, educate how to do cut stump, and it's really good, like 3-4 minute video. Again, if you paid for your CEU, type in your email address. And thank you all for attending. And we'll see, Dr. Lyons, any more questions for you?
Okay. I can't see the chat box, so
Oh, yeah, that. Okay, well, if they come out, I'll ask them that the surveys popped up in front of your screen.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, if I see any more questions. Uh, I'll read them to you. It says, thanks for the presentation. Thank you all for attending. We enjoyed doing these presentations. David says, asks, can I still apply for CEU? David, your question is, do you have a license? If you have a license number, uh, if you watched this webinar's entirety and you have a license number, you can go back to the Natural Resource Webinar website and go register for your CEU credit for your payment. I mean, okay. Clayton asked a question here, Dr. Lyons. Can the cut stump method be used under the canopy of a live oak safely?
Yes, I think you can. That if you don't overuse it, just apply it as we suggested. You want to spray the cut surface and whatever bark sticking above the ground, almost the point of runoff. You don't. The only thing you might ever see if you did it when it was hot is you might see some volatilization of that remedy diesel. But I would suggest doing it during a cooler part of the year where you don't have that problem. Once you get above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, you can have volatilization of remedy diesel or triclopyr ester diesel mix. So I would just avoid hotter times of the year. It's more comfortable to do. And you shouldn't have any problem.
He says, thank you for answering the question. We all keep, if you have any more questions, I'll go ahead and type them out. And again, thank you all for attending today. You have one more question here, Dr. Lyons. After I stump cut, I've been doing a couple of small plugs cut in the stump, so there's a little pool to hold the herbicide longer. Am I wasting my time?
Yes. If you cut that level close to the ground, you have no debris on it, you shouldn't have to do anything else. I mean, just treat it immediately. You don't need to. You're not going to use enough to really puddle up anyhow. So yeah, I think it's more work than you need to be doing.